And what may be for the last time this year, maybe. Coming straight from Tobago, this is Talking Point, the WESN, the content capital. You almost said two of me, but that's all right. In the end, there can only be one. And that probably most of my friends will say might be borderline too much anyway. Now, I will say this, I do find this period interesting because we've reached a point that I did not necessarily anticipate. Ironically, the murder rate is not at the highest it's been, and yet national security concerns at the end of the day seem to be the big overarching topic, much like COVID was essentially when WSN and Talking Point now started. That was the big topic that, you know, for the most part dominated the headlines and was ongoing. And right now, just the amount of national security topics and, pardon the pun, talking points that are sustainable, it makes me wonder to what extent this is the fallout of previous mismanagement, previous budgeting. And when you get to budgeting, then it gets into more of a debate. It's not quite as clear-cut as you would think with regards to how much to budget for national security, how much to budget for other pressing needs. So now we've reached a point, however, where we might need to sacrifice more for national security. And I've already said that I'm all for that because people are dying. But there are other needs, and maybe before we welcome the good lady, I'll get into that. She herself has a different national security topic to talk about this morning, but I wanted to continue the commentary just to start up the morning on what's going on with the whole SOE, but particularly with the relocation of prisoners. Now, we try to be fair and balanced on this show, on this network. We're not necessarily going to be married to a position, and then of course anything that might look as though it contradicts that position, we're going to just disagree with out of hand, regardless of the merits of the point. No. So, as someone who is more than willing to criticize independent Senator Anthony Vieira for the way he positions himself, the manner of which he communicates, which by his own words and deeds undermines the perception of his independence. I'm not going to say that he isn't independent. I'm saying that his own statements and actions, but particularly his statements, at times potentially undermines his own independence. So I have, on occasion, disagreed with him quite severely or quite strictly. But in this case, over this issue, I very much appreciate, acknowledge, and support, and would probably even encourage his stance, because he's basically saying that while on principle, he will agree with the SOE, right? Given the information on the serious threat. And again, this is one of those things where unless they are outright lying, and this is not no small lie, this is not even a normal lie of corruption. This would be one hell of a big lie. So big that it is implausible. It's implausible to make that assumption. You would need some significant evidence to prove, oh, this is the entirety of this SOE threat is a complete lie. And let's not forget, the president, and maybe this is where, you know, you could use some of the past criticisms, but it is what it is. The president signed off on it, right? And she's not an appointee of the current administration. So he said he's prepared to give his principal support. However, while, and this is the reporting phrasing, well, I assume this is what he said, but it's not quoted. While the measure is not an overreach, a clear and necessary response to avert the danger in question, but, quote, support does not preclude scrutiny. And it certainly does not mean that we as legislatures should forego our duty to interrogate the implication of what we are being asked to approve. All this to say, his stance is prisoners can't be permanently, and that's the key part here, detained in military facilities, or at least permanently detained in military facilities as is, because he points out a basic truth, especially when you look at our situation, right? Essentially, military bases are designed to function as prisons, nor are its personnel trained to operate as prison officers. Now, in larger countries with much larger militaries, like the US military, there are prisons operated by the US military. I believe the Army operates Leavenworth, and I think the Navy has their own facility, right? So there's at least two. And the guards are technically enlisted and commissioned officers and enlisted personnel of the US military. So they are technically soldiers. However, their specialty is correctional officers. So as much as they are technically soldiers, their training is more like prison guards than actual soldiers. If this was in America, what Senator Vieira said wouldn't really be true, but this is Trinidad and Tobago. We don't have a military at that scale where it's going to have its own prison facilities. It might have its own detention facilities for a soldier that disobeys the rules. But to say that it's going to have prison facilities as part of its structure and prison officer specialties, no, we don't have that. So in the context of Trinidad and Tobago, what Senator Vieira said is absolutely true and is a very practical concern. These soldiers are not trained to be guards. Now, the flip side to that is these soldiers are outsiders to everything that's been going on in the prison service right now. They are not necessarily immune to either the threats or temptation, but they are removed enough that at the very least it gives you an opportunity or a chance to reset the situation in the short term in order to try to stabilize the overall situation. You can't say we have an existential threat and then you keep the same security breaches in place, which is basically what would have happened if those prisoners stayed there. And I say that based on all of the reporting, all of the information coming out, both from official channels, mostly from official channels, and to some extent from unofficial ones, right? It's reasonable. It's reasonable to say, because no one could prove that there isn't either corruption or blackmail affecting prison guards. So it's reasonable to say, look, we have a clear and present danger now. We have a threat now. We need to put things in place to stop the threat now. And this is not that far out of left field. Independent Senator Vieira says, generally speaking, the measure as it is, he is willing to support. This is not that far of a stretch. The thing is, and what I appreciate about his stance is that you are technically still doing something outside of the norm that involves the rights of individuals. And that's important not for the individual rights of the prisoners, whether on remand or convicted. That's important because it sets precedents for the future. It sets precedents that will apply to a whole host of cases that don't just include gangsters. It sets precedents for the society of Trinidad and Tobago of how we will treat these situations. So on the off chance that common citizen you or I might end up in a situation, whether we commit a crime or we're falsely accused, we would appreciate having certain protections in place. And also, when you are infringing on or potentially infringing on anyone's rights, regardless of how justified it is, because that essentially is what he's saying. The situation is justified, on its surface at least, what's been presented so far. But even if it is going to stay in that justifiable zone, it will never veer into any unjustifiable territory. It still behooves the system of government by which we live under to have someone to always question it. The questioning is not because of doubt. The question is to ensure, to confirm, in order to, basically it's like transparency. From the side of, we're being transparent to prove that everything is fine here up front. We're not going to wait for some controversy and then we have to go and look into things and prove that it wasn't an immoral or unethical or illegal action. We're going to be upfront about it, and having someone question things, having someone red teaming the situation, being, you know, the devil's advocate in a constructive way up front allows for that, because we're talking about individual rights. And like I said, it's not just about the rights of the prisoners who are currently in prison. This is about societal rights, because innocent people do get locked up and they don't always get freed in a timely manner. So having someone to always question it, essentially, this is what the opposition is technically supposed to be there for. The opposition is not there to be the opposing political force. You do that in elections. You're there to hold the government to account. But basically in the last, I don't know how many decades, we don't always get that. What we get is opposing political forces. Can't even say ideologies, really. Opposing political agendas. And that doesn't always speak to the needs of society. So we have an independent bench. I do believe in the UK, the House of Lords are not tied to political parties. I could be wrong about that. But given the fact that those seats are hereditary and based on, you know, in some of them at least, on hereditary titles passed down from since long time ago, the current political party environment does not necessarily, or should not, to some degree, affect them. But we don't have that. So we have the independent bench. And if the opposition is going to play politics, which around the world, not just us, this is not just a special deficiency we have. Around the world, you're going to find that. Well, we have the independent bench to be a backstop, to try to be the check on policy, to try to be the check to ensure that individual rights and freedoms are maintained, or at least if taken away, they're done for good reason and done only for that good reason and not then exploited into unnecessary areas. So I agree more or less 100% with Senator Vieira, despite my criticisms of the independent senator in the past, despite the fact that I myself have questioned his independence. It is right for him to do this because he's not saying I am opposing it because I disagree with it and I don't care what the government says. He's saying I am more than willing to support this. I just need to make sure that it's being done properly and we don't go overboard. And that is not just fine, that should be encouraged. That should be the norm. The government themselves ideally would have a member or two in cabinet, given their various perspectives of their various portfolios, to ask some of these questions, to ensure some of these things, to have some of these concerns, like maybe the Minister of Legal Affairs, or to some degree the Attorney General. And speaking of the Attorney General said he went to the barracks to check on the detainees, right? One of the, I guess you could say, big quotes or high profile quotes or sensational quotes or charge quotes is he basically said, well, look, this is not the Hyatt. And I think this is one of the things that I will agree with callers and the sentiment from the population, those who have it. As someone who will argue for the rights of individuals, because I don't want bad precedents set that could affect other people. This is not a vacation, even for people on remand. And I feel as though to some extent the prison service may, I'm not a professional correctional officer or lawyer, but the prison service may be using the excuse, well, people on remand, they're not convicted yet, so they have certain rights that convicted prisoners don't have. And I think, and I wonder, maybe that's a better way to put it, I wonder if wanting to give certain perks to prisoners, which borderline go beyond the norm of any other correctional facility. Now, let's not forget, there are prisons in Europe and Scandinavia that will make the rest of the world's prisons look like torture cells, and they're Club Med. They're some kind of, you know, 3-star resort or something. But that's how their prison service waits for them, right? I don't think they deal with violent crime like we do, and if they are, I don't think those easy, low-security prisons are where they're going to put that type of offender. I could be wrong. But I get it. Innocent until proven guilty. But when even if you're in remand, like I would never have thought, oh, well, you know, I am charged with a crime. I'm going in remand, but I could still live a life of luxury. I would have never made that assumption. And perhaps one of the issues is the general public also, to some extent, doesn't look at it that way, but somehow the situation has kind of reached that point or come close to that point, or at least gone in that direction. And this whole notion of, oh my gosh, the rights and there shouldn't be any, but why? There are essentially, whether, and this is the other thing, it's not entirely clear to me if the people in Building 13 were on remand or convicted. Regardless, essentially what's going on is they are under suspicion for a new crime. And we're not talking about any old crime. We ain't talking about robbing a cricks from a corner store. We're talking about, and I don't know to what extent I'm willing to just 100% believe the article in one of the daily newspapers that basically didn't outline, but gave certain details about use of explosives, that C4 was found on the prison, that RPGs were going to be used against national security helicopters and aircraft, that grenades were going to be used against national security and state-run facilities, like and judiciary and judges and prison officers and police officers and etc. were being targeted. I don't know to what extent I'm going to fully believe it. I do think the possibility, it's not unrealistic. And more importantly, look, if they have intelligence, they have enough intelligence for the president to sign off on it. They probably have enough intelligence for the AG to say, yeah, this is good enough, right? I don't know if they're going to charge anybody of anything, but there's some heavy suspicion here. And we're not talking about taking away the rights of these people to the point where it's inhumane. To some extent, why do you have a right to television and to pay for your own? I still, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this happens in other prisons around the world all the time. But I just, because I've never heard of it, it seems so strange to me that Mr. Ali will have the right to order his own food. So now, Raji Ali is his lawyers, I believe. They're accusing the state of plotting to kill him because I think there was a incorrect rumor or social media post that his clients, that is to say Mr. Ali himself, escaped the barracks, right? So his attorney has said that they had identified, this is a quote, a pattern of misinformation and false narrative being advanced by the government of Trinidad and Tobago in an apparent attempt to justify the allegations. Now, first of all, they have to kind of show where the social media claims originated from. But anyway, right? Here's the thing. There's two reasons why I think they might want to say this. This is assuming it's basically coming from Mr. Ali directing it to his lawyers, or at least one of them is. The first reason, and this could come from the lawyers themselves, is that they're trying to do everything they can to remove their client from the base and get him back into the maximum security prison. Now, when you think about it, to the common citizen, you're probably thinking, how is it that the maximum security prison is like that much more comfortable for you? And what kind of prison do we have? Now, granted, certain things like a clean bed, clean bathroom facilities, right? Those are necessary things. You can't have a prison where people are just getting sick and you're not giving them health care, getting sick because it's not clean, and then just arbitrarily die. That's kind of unethical. That's lines I'm not willing to cross. But once you meet those basic things, right? To the rest of us, what difference does it make? But apparently it makes a big difference to them. So it seems as though they're trying to spin a narrative to put public pressure to get some kind of sympathy. See, it's a plot to kill him. How convenient that there's a plot to kill him. Now, granted, let's be frank, given what we know about people dying in custody, it can happen. The thing is, first of all, I don't know if they would put this much thought into a plot. to kill a prisoner extrajudicially, judicially. But more importantly, why would well, I am assuming he wants to go back to the maximum security prison. I don't know, maybe this is now just a way to try to win points for his client and maybe get a lawsuit, get him off. I don't know, right? But is the maximum security prison supposedly safer? Because if the prison was being run properly, arguably speaking, the same plot could happen out of the prison, just like it could happen out of the barracks, technically speaking. They've put less effort to cover up the killing of prisoners in the past. Let's just put it bluntly, right? Now, the only other thing is Mr. Ali might be uncomfortable in the barracks because he no longer has a certain level of control and comfort. But when I say uncomfortable, you might think, yeah, well, he doesn't have creature comforts, he'll be uncomfortable. No, I think it's control in the sense of the inmates were potentially running the asylum. That article, I'll say from the Express, gives a number of 40 prison officers, including a senior officer, has been flagged, meaning who they suspect, not necessarily the total, as aiding illicit activities by smuggling contraband into the prison system. So of course, if he's running the asylum, why does he want to go to another facility where he doesn't have that authority? It's going to make him uncomfortable because he won't necessarily feel as safe. He doesn't have that level of control. This is all alleged. This is all alleged, right? So ultimately, I guess, to me, it seems like a ploy to try to get him out of the barracks and back in the prison system. The thing is, and this is the ultimate weakness of this strategy. And I'm not saying that it's right for the population to think this way, but I think there would be a significant, if not majority of the population that are going to look at a prisoner from the maximum security prison, claiming wolf, crying wolf, saying they have a plot to kill me. And dare I say, most of the population is not going to care. And if there actually is a plot to kill him, dare I say, there is not going to be much public sympathy over it. Because just look at the context of everything. I don't really see the public having much sympathy for Mr. Raji Ali at all. And things like this might just go through one and out the other. Or worse, further negative perception. And that's probably not really good for him with regards to certain aspects, like if he has a jury trial or whatever, for whatever comes up. And yeah, I think this plea potentially falls on deaf ears. Some people might be concerned about it on principle. I myself normally would be concerned about these things on principle. But to some extent, emotionally, I'm kind of taking my cue from what I think the population is going to do here. Because emotionally, I don't have enough consideration to deal with all of the things of the country and then also include this. Because the claim itself, I don't think is substantial enough or substantiated enough or proven enough for me to take it seriously. That's point number one. Because at the end of the day, whether it is directly said or indirectly implied, Mr. Ali is under suspicion of being one of the organizers of a plot to harm people, destroy and disrupt part of the national security apparatus, and escape using extremely violent means. So it's kind of hard for me to have sympathy for a man in that position, particularly when he and his lawyers have been kind of playing games. A judge has ruled you can't be blindfolded. There's nothing wrong with that for you to see your clients. Because the lawyers that I believe were speaking under the banner of NATOC, they kind of undermined their own arguments. Access to legal counsel is the right. But nowhere does it say that the legal counsel can't be blindfolded, because there are direct security concerns of information and communication breaches suspected by your own clients. And I think the judges of TNT has basically shown, look, at the end of the day, proportionality, reasonableness. Why do you think that your clients should have certain things that could lead into the same security breaches the transfer was meant to prevent? And they're not denying you access, but to be fair, I would argue national security, at least temporarily, and they did so to some extent, but it could have been longer, is what I'm saying, temporarily could have denied access to his lawyers. Once he's not being charged or interrogated or anything like that, if he's just being held there in a secure facility while they're trying to deal with the security threat, they probably could have gotten away with a temporarily limit on his access to his lawyers. And essentially that's what happened. When he was transferred, they didn't get access right away. And a judge, I think it was Frank Cipasa, basically said, hey, the party now start. Y'all don't necessarily need to see him right away. Let us just deal with the protocols of the security concerns, because that's the nature of the state of emergency threat in the first place. So we have to deal with the security protocols to get you access before you can just demand and be afforded access. And it's almost like if they are trying to operate as if it's business as usual any given Tuesday, and they don't understand the position their client's in. And I do wonder if that is actually a disservice to the clients, or if it's the clients demanding their lawyers represent them a certain way, and the lawyers might actually be giving advice. This is not necessarily a good idea. I don't know what it is. But with that said, there are other points that I could have made beyond, because like I said, the national security concern could have been in part a consequence of how the previous administration budgeted things. There are budgetary concerns that the current government has to still keep on their list of priorities while potentially trying to rectify a resource system for national security. But I can't go into those things. I'll just make that point and end things here, because the good lady is here. So we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll delve into another aspect of national security. This is in many ways a big one from the campaign trail, because this was, I guess you could say, for lack of any other plan, the plan. We will defend ourselves. I don't know if that's a great plan. We will talk about what's proposed on the table next. Stay tuned.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas, and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title, It's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Struggling with heart health or frequent migraines? Discover the simple steps to reclaim your energy and vitality.
We're diving into a topic that affects about 422 million people around the world: diabetes.
Tune into Wellness Unlocked, the series that delivers expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and well-being. Your health matters. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and take the first step toward better health.
And we're back here on Talking About on WESN Content Capital Show. Michael Small, joined by the good lady herself, Karen Shishera, here to speak about, well, to some degree, the stand your ground proposals and the ideology or concept of stand your ground, but then also to a greater extent or to an expanded extent, what it means for individual rights with regards to law enforcement and, you know, rules of engagement, the use of force of the society, because that's the tricky situation that we find ourselves in with any kind of legislation to do with the use of firearms or violent action that could lead to the ending of someone's life. When is it justifiable? How is the employment of violence justifiable? And to some extent, even state agents have those questions right now that are not necessarily resolved. So to have this discussion with me, of course, is good lady Karen Shishera. Karen, good morning.
According to you, Sean, yes, we're going to be talking about the Stand Your Ground proposed legislation. And I won't say that I've come to a definitive position, but I think that it's important for us to look at what is being proposed and whether it is necessary. And beyond whether it is necessary, if we are then opening up a can of worms, are we now looking to create issues regarding the judicial system that may make things even more difficult than they already are? So just broadly, we know that the Attorney General, the Office of the Attorney General has circulated, it's online, and very good that we have legislation is deemed to be the Protection Against Home Invasion, and it's Self-Defense and Defense of Property Bill 2025. So they do a detailed examination of it, and they actually give you, at the end of the discussion and looking at the various jurisdictions and the application of the equivalent of stand your ground legislation in those jurisdictions, or it not being implemented, the actual bill that is being proposed. So what I will just say at the outset, Trinidad and Tobago, we know we are a former British colony. So I only mention that to say that both the common law, which is the case law that would have developed around this area of what they call the Castle Doctrine, which is a subset of the right to self-defense, because it is a self-defense, but self-defense in particular in relation to your home or your castle. Your home is your castle. And then you have the legislation, which is in the Offences Against the Persons Act 1925, which is still our law, as we know, because the savings provisions in the Constitution, we have not repealed that law, so it still remains our law. So what does the Castle Doctrine say? Well, it is a doctrine that was developed from a case, that's why, and it basically says, and the document from the Attorney General's office does give you, speak to it, it's not a formal part of the common law, but it's rooted in the common law. And what it emphasizes, the right to use reasonable force to defend oneself and others and one's home from intruders. So it is really focusing on the home. And in United Kingdom, they do not have stand your ground legislation. What they do have, and the AG's document does speak to that. It has what the most impactful one is the 2008 Criminal Justice and Immigration Act. And basically, and also the 2013 amendment to that act. And the specific provision is section 76 of the British Act. And the reason why I'm referring to it is because oftentimes we take our laws, or even if we adapted or adopted from either Australia, Canada, or the UK. So in the case of the United Kingdom, as I said, they do not have stand your ground laws. What they do have is a provision in section 76, which I tried to write down. It's called, yes, it's called Criminal and Justice Immigration Act 2008. And what it does say, and this is the important thing, it does not give you the right. It's not a permissive. It does not give you the right to shoot first and ask questions later. It does not give you the right to stand your ground and not retreat. But it does say, even though it does say that, it says that in response to a threat, you can use reasonable force depending on the circumstances, and the force that you use must be, or the threat must be proportionate. In other words, you don't take up well, you might, I don't know, a stone and then use a gun. You might do that if the stone is a boulder. But in any event, it must be proportionate. And what the court looks at in determining whether the force, you have a reasonable belief that you or members of your family or persons in your dwelling home, because that is essentially where it started with only that. Oh yes, and they added, yes, that's where it started. What it does say, and this is the important difference, it says that in determining whether there are reasonable grounds that you were facing an imminent threat, they look at the circumstances. And what is the important circumstance is this. It says in deciding whether the defense, which could end up in a person being killed, obviously, is whether the defendant, which means the now the accused, because he's going to be standing trial if the person has died, could have retreated, is to be considered rather than as giving rise to a duty to retreat. So there's no duty to retreat, but the court looks at, were you reasonably in fear of your life? Were you reasonable? And of course they understand imminent, because you don't have time to twiddle your thumb and say, should I or shouldn't I? It's an immediate situation, you respond immediately. But they look at the factors, but what they say is, you do not have a duty to retreat, but they're saying they are going to look and see whether, in the circumstances that gave rise to your shooting the person, ending in their death or their being injured, whether you had an opportunity to retreat. So that's the difference. So that's where the British, and then they did a 2013 amendment, which added, and he speaks of it, the AG's document speaks of it. In 2013, they added an amendment to that same law, which added the householders, they added something specifically called the householders. I'm looking for it, but in any event, and what it does, it allows you to use that force. No duty, you do not have a right to stand your ground, but they do acknowledge that if someone is a household invasion, that is a situation where you will be entitled to use reasonable force, and also it extended to the armed forces as well as another armed forces, and not only the household, but I'm just trying to find it, and I just can't seem to find the exact provision that the UK has. Yes, England and Wales. So you had the Criminal Justice and Immigration Act. Then the one I'm speaking about is the Crime and Courts Act 2013. It's called the Householder's Defense. So this new section, which they added to the 2008 Act, says that it allows the use of force which is not reasonable to be used once the force was not grossly disproportionate. And it extends to shopkeepers, and it extends to the armed forces. So that was a big difference to 2008. Yes, Sean?
I just want to add, one thing to take into account, at least compared to America, as my understanding is, private citizens gun laws are much more strict in the UK. So I think part of their framework is probably accounting for the fact not everybody is necessarily having a gun. They might defend themselves in other ways. So it kind of makes the situation not quite the same as to what even we are potentially putting on the table where, yeah, everybody's going to get a gun, right? That's kind of what the implication of the campaign promise was. And as you know, a gun, as opposed to fighting off someone with your fists or with a bat, a gun is a very, like, it's going to potentially kill you with one shot. It's a very lethal way to defend yourself. So the burden on the law in the UK, it's subjective, but it also might not necessarily be designed to have to treat with a whole lot of defense of someone's home and business utilizing firearms to the degree that's potentially on the table for us.
Well, I would say to that, in response to that, I will say that I think part of the reason why things are different in the United States than they are in Trinidad or in the UK is because America has this right to bear arms. We don't want federal control over how they live. And most of these people have guns. They use it usually for hunting and so on. So that is part and parcel of their cowboy mentality, the Wild West, wearing guns. They have a different experience. They have a different culture. They have a different history. There are pockets where you will have the stand your ground will come into play. But they're not Trinidad and Tobago. Our country could fit into a borough in New York. So we can't, and the issues that Trinidad is dealing with are not the issues that is facing the entire, they have a National Rifles Association, which is a powerful lobby group. There's so many differences with America that I can't think that that reason is a good enough reason. England is an they are humanists. They are the persons that support human rights. America withdrew from those, Trump withdrew from those entities. He's withdrawn from so many of the United Nations, international organizations that are supposed to do good for people. They're not even part of the International Criminal Justice Court. So don't use America. I mean, that's about as bad example. And in fact,
I was using the United Kingdom.
Well, yes, but I'm saying to you, okay, and I'm saying to you that the reason why UK does that is because they have a different ethos.
Yes.
They have a different outlook. And it's not without reason. Now, let me just go to the point that you were just speaking to. And that is from the statistics, because that's what he did. He looked at some of the countries. He looked at the UK. He looked at the United States, in particular, Florida. And then he looked also at Canada and Australia. Now, what is very telling, and I looked up these studies, and from the National Library of Medicine, they did 25 studies, reviewed them, all focusing on self-defense, expansion of these stand your ground laws. They said Florida, the home of Trayvon Martin, based studies, robust increase from 24% to 25% in firearms, while stand your ground claims more often deny when the victims are white, especially when the claimant is of racial minority. In fact, this is what they had another study said. It said that the statistics, they said in homicides in white shooters killing black victims are deemed to be justifiable using the stand your ground 5 times more frequently than when it's the opposite way around, when it's a black shooter and a white victim, it's 5 times less frequent that the stand your ground will succeed. They said 11% of cases deemed justifiable, while with white shooters and white victims. When they both are black, 8%. When the shooter is white and the victim is black, it's 34% success rate. When it's black, which is white, it's 3%. And that's not vigilant. That is not made up story. I just remembered, and I just went and looked it up. That young man, 16 years of age, an honest student. He didn't die. An honest student went looking for his twin brother to pick him up, and he went on the wrong street. And he went and knocked on this man's door. And is a old white man. And when he came out, he took his gun and shot him. And then when they went to go and charge him, Kansas City man when the charge, there was an outcry because they wanted to charge him with what? Some foolishness. They wanted to charge him with, eventually they had to pull it, they wanted to charge him initially with some minor offense until there was such a public outcry against it that they had to upgrade it, but not anything of much consequence. And that young man survived that shooting. That young man survived. So your son or your daughter goes to the wrong house thinking it's someone that they can go to, knock on their door. That's what that's what you're doing, is you are telling people it's okay to do it. Because the Gleaner they said, keep out of our business. That was what it said. But Trinidad and Tobago was in an editorial, warned Trinidad about doing it, and they are in a position to do that because they don't have that legislation, but they have gotten a definite decrease, significant decrease in crime and murders in that country. So I think they could talk. And this is what they said. And they, in fact, this is before elections. They said they understood that you are dealing with similar problems, but it said that when the Prime Minister, when she was not Prime Minister, so then she's Prime Minister now. She said, you can remember, when the criminals invade your homes, you can draw your licensed firearm and light them up, empty the whole clip, empty it, light them up. We have to fight fire with fire. That is what your Prime Minister said before she became Prime Minister. So you have to understand, as the Jamaicans have said, you're turning it from vigilante to judges. And that is not any exaggeration about the risk that you're taking. And I said Jamaica can talk. Yes, Jamaica can talk, because I have the data from Jamaica about the significant drop in murders. They told us don't lecture them. They said don't lecture us, right? They said that Jamaica's parish courts are backlog free. This is actually taught me at law, Faculty of Law. They said the Minister of Justice, Delroy Chuck, says Jamaica's parish courts are now backlog free. I think they got a 37% decrease in murders, 37% decrease in murders, 75% clearing of the backlog, and they don't have stand your ground laws. And in fact, they wrote, don't do it. It's a dangerous law to put into place. So why are you going down that road when you see in America, where about 34 states have adopted it, and it has had so much controversy, and you see the racial and the social issues playing out, because the person who you shot, who was the intruder, is dead men tell no tales. Dead men tell no tales. So how are you going to deal with something like that? And there's going to be a definite, because we see it with the police killings. We see how people have reacted to the police killings. And that is why I thought this gentleman who, I was looking for the article with the Jamaica, where they actually showed you drop in, they showed you the drop in murder rate? Yes, a big drop. I'm looking for it right now. Gosh, I can't find. Anyhow, this year when they did looking at 2024, they showed that there was a significant drop in the murder rates in Jamaica, and they do not have any stand your ground laws. And they wrote, the Gleaner wrote 2 articles before she became Prime Minister and after she became Prime Minister, warning against it, and they told us to mind our own business. And so this is what they said. Look what it says. Significant progress we made in reducing backlog in the crime system. Yes, this is what they said. So we have introduced, they're talking about the courts, and they're saying that there's a significant progress has been made in reducing backlogs in the criminal justice system. They have said that we have introduced in those courts case management system. They said now they're saying the standard for a court, a matter we heard in the rural courts, in which we'll have the equivalent, is 3 months for standard cases, 6 months for complex cases, and 12 months for highly complex cases, right? So they've been able to clear up a lot of the backlog. They said that we were way down before in the 30s and 40s, but we are now moving in the right direction. So we have to get 100 and get up to 100 and 120% improvement. They talked about the reduction in murders. So you want to know if it could be used? UK doesn't have it. And guess what? Jamaica is a CARICOM country. It shows it has much in common with us. But you know what they did? They did what we're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be doing what we are not doing.
Well,
go ahead.
One of the things that I brought up the last point is, the point was that England has a certain culture, and I guess some of my concerns on that aspect of it kind of mirrors yours, in the sense of we seem to be very influenced culturally more by America presently than by England. Historically by England, but presently by America. And I do wonder if a lot of what you're concerned about, because we're not putting in self-defense laws like the UK, where not everybody has a gun. The campaign promise was we're gonna let everyone who wants a gun have a gun, and then we're gonna put in these laws to make it legal for you to defend yourself in whatever capacity. And like you, I'm just thinking, look, this is not necessarily something, this is a Pandora's box in that regard, where culturally, are we really ready to deal with that kind of responsibility, or are we going to be trigger happy and then shoot first, ask questions later, or shocks? Because that's essentially what happened in Tobago a few months ago. It could have happened twice. I think there were two different situations, but the one I remembered, it was an older gentleman who was mentally handicapped, I think, and essentially an off-duty police officer, someone who should have potentially had more training, was afraid, right? That's what was reported, and shot him because he was knocking on his door. Not because he actually got into his house, from what I understood. And it was a case
you don't have to get in the house under this law.
We're going to have more killings like this, which are totally unnecessary, if we rely on arming the population to defend themselves.
It's not only that. You look at now, the fact is that there's police killings up by 133% in 2025. I looked at the 2019 figures. It said extrajudicial killings are up by 85% in Trinidad and Tobago. So you have to understand that when you're talking about allowing this legislation, which says you do not have to retreat, you can stand your ground once you believe that you are in reasonable fear of your life and or threat of imminent threat of your life. What it also is showing you that the spike in police-related killings in 2019, they talked about that, right? So when you see things like that, they said this is in 2019, they said a police confront a sustained wave of violence in the country. Some 23 people have been killed in officer-involved shooting this year, a 64% increase over the similar period in 2018. So you have to take into account is that the way that we want to go? Is that the way that Trinidad needs to be going? And then when we look at the, and you talked about an old man and is mentally ill, and they do take that into account in the bill, all that is taken into account. But what the thing is, you mustn't underestimate that Trinidad and Tobago has continued to be divided over ethnic lines. So we may not have the same racial issues in terms of ethnic groups, but we do have them. We do have them. Okay, yeah. We do have it. And in fact, in America, you know why they would support it? Of course they would support it, because the majority of the population is Caucasian. And the fact of the matter is that when they use that defense, stand your ground, the studies show that they're nearly always successful, whereas when a black person tries to use it, they don't. So why wouldn't you support that in America? We are not America. The population here is not 80% Caucasian and then the minorities. We are the equal in numbers. You are looking for trouble. I am saying we are looking for unnecessary trouble. And if Jamaica could do it without, if Jamaica not only could do it without having that law, but seen a significant reduction in their murder, it's because they're putting in place measures that will not have to be using such a controversial law and potentially I can't see the positive over the negative.
There's also the aspect of a lot of the gun owners, or at least currently and probably initially, are going to be business owners, right? And you also have the case of socioeconomic class warfare in the sense of, hey, who's going to be concerned about a business owner defending their property from pests, quote unquote, right? And to some extent that happens now, but it's behind closed doors. No one wants to look into it. No one wants to investigate it. Therefore, no one wants to confirm whether the shooting is justified or not. So you will get some cases where, hey, Maybe in one case your life was threatened, but in all cases was the life of the businessman or businesswoman threatened? And yes, I get it. There are business owners who get killed by criminal elements, but that doesn't mean that you just paint people with a broad brush. So the socioeconomic class disparity, because to what degree will lower socioeconomic bracket people have the capacity, if we are depending on private-owned firearms to everyone defend yourself? Well, how does that help poor people who might not be able to afford these firearms, much less get the, it doesn't matter whether they get the license or not. Okay, so right? But I do wonder if there will be a partiality for the business owners and the like to get licenses over poor people. That's just a concern that mirrors the potential racial tension that's already existing in crime right now.
Exactly, and actually I'm seeing now 106 police killings under probe by the PCA, that's West. But what I wanted to say too is that then that's a part of the facade, the thing that we have to stop pretending. The police will tell you that. I read all that thing from the United Nations report will tell you organized crime is at the heart of our crime. Who is involved in organized crime? Would it be many of those same businessmen? Won't it be some of those very same businessmen? This Trinidad is not America. Trinidad is not America. We have not, over 30 years, we have not been able to deal with the transnational crime and cocaine and the women, using women, human trafficking, terrorism, this money laundering. You saw from this SAR, the report suspicious transactions, 6.8 billion in suspicious transactions. Who you think is involved in that? Who you think is some of those same business people? And that is why I saw an excellent letter, and I thought I had kept it. And this gentleman says, okay, you want to pass the stand your ground legislation, and the idea is to reduce the number of home invasions and murder and so on. This is what he's saying. Freedom is freedom, which is why I need a 3/5 majority to pass that law. It's not something that you can be abused. There's responsibility that goes with it. So if you're going to arm persons with and give them a license, number one, I think they already said that they wouldn't have just the Commissioner of Police. They'll have a team that will look over the applications. That's one. Two, you have to show me your money. Show me your money. You have to be able to satisfy the committee where your money came from, right? Then also you should install CCTV cameras in your house because dead men tell no tales. They also say that you should be submitted to a lie detector test and a drug test. If you could pass all of those things, give them the gun. I have a feeling a lot of them won't be able to do that. And then on the police side, he says, well, if the police are going to, a lot of times, the police go out, they do not have on body cameras, the body camera is not working, the body cameras are low visibility, all kinds of things. If you are going, that is your corroborating evidence. That is the corroborating evidence. So what you need to do, if you want to pass that law, you have to make those requirements part of the FUL application. And so far as the police are concerned, obviously, situations can arise. They're on the beach, they're hanging out, they're in plain clothes. We have to look at the fact that you send them out on a mission. You have to ensure that they are equipped with the body cameras, that they are on, and if they're not, the disciplinary charges are brought against them. When you put those checks and balances into the system, I think the fair people have, and many people have, as they have in the United States, is that it may be abused and used as an excuse to continue this rampage of crime and murder. And by the way, the SORT, S-O-R-T, which got its name from S-A-U-T-T, from Mr. Manning, when asked, the acting commissioner of police, when he was asked why SORT was disbanded and given another name given, because of those same extrajudicial killings, because America had said that there are too many police killings, and that they are concerned about it, and they were limiting the funds that they were giving us, because it's not something you could say it's good for them, let them die. When you allow that situation to get out of control, you may be dealing with a bigger problem than you bargained for. So why go down that road? Why go down that road?
I think one of the things because you could say for both the police and private FEL users, it's one thing to train how to shoot a gun and how to be accurate with a gun. But to what extent is there training to help train people when to use a gun, when it's appropriate, when it's not? And there are training simulators in other countries, and there are role-playing exercises if you can't have big technology in other jurisdictions. And to what extent do we have those provisions here? Because one of my fears is, for the public, one, they might not have enough training to just be accurate with the gun, get into a gunfight and get themselves killed. But two, in a high-stress situation, will they be able to exercise good judgment on when it's appropriate? Because we've already seen examples of police officers not necessarily exercising good judgment when it's appropriate. And they, in theory, should be trained. So I would have to question, to what extent is their training sufficient? Obviously, when a unit goes out on a mission, as you say, and you want them to have body cameras, and then situations where they expect to confront violence, to some extent, it's actually a bit more straightforward. They shoot at me, I shoot back. But there will always be cases, and civilians especially will be in those cases where it's not necessary. They're not shooting at you off the jump. They're not shooting first to make it easy, and if they shoot first, they might kill you, right? And now we put guns in civilians' hands. Mistakes can be made. That's always an issue with firearms. It doesn't have to be an intentional, malicious act, but it could still lead to someone dying, and that's still going to be a problem that's going to have severe consequences for the user. And if they're not prepared and not knowledgeable, and they don't know how to deal with those kind of confrontations, we're going to see deaths that are unnecessary. And with what you just said earlier, we might not see any improvements. We probably won't see any improvements. Then what will be the point? So, and that's part of the concern, that more people will die, but no improvement will be made to the situation.
And then there will be an element of controversy. I just want to be fair, though, in the bill.
Yes.
Looking at the bill itself, which it's included in the document, so people can look at the bill.
Yeah, at the end, yeah.
Yes, and so one of the things it does allow is not only they give you a definition of a dwelling house or associated place, so they give you who is an occupier. We don't have time to go through that, but there's a pretty fair extended definition. It also includes that if it's a commercial place, but you also live in there, that would constitute a dwelling house. If you are a member of the armed forces, that is another group that is also has that protection. There are a number of persons who fall underneath that. They also tell you that when there's no duty to retreat in a home invasion, but then they define home invasion. So it's not a simple thing of, shooting off like that. They give you clear guidelines as to what would constitute a home invasion. And the problem is, how does sometimes the person doesn't know they're unlawfully there, and then because you're acting so quickly, you might go and shoot and then ask questions when the person might have just been innocently coming there, I just see that creating a lot of issues that you're already dealing with the defense of self-defense, which is in our legislation. Section 7 is called the Offense Against the Persons Act, excusable homicide, that allows for self-defense. But of course, it's not sufficient. I think you need to look at what the British have done and expanding the meaning of self-defense under that. It's actually under self-defense, Section 76, and the amendments made in 2013 to that which deals with the homeowner household. So I think that is probably the better way to go. But it's not, you can use self-defense, but it's not a simple thing of, you're going to have a little uphill battle in determining whether it was reasonable. And they outline the circumstances which would determine whether it's reasonable or not. That is in the British law. I think it's in the Canadian law. So they give you a whole list of factors that the court can take into account. When you're defending your property, it doesn't only mean your dwelling house, but it also means your property, meaning it might be fenced, but it may not be fenced. A person may not know they're going on your property because there's no fencing off. You may not have cut a part of it, you left it to grow wild. So they may not know that you're there on your property, and they may go on your property, and then next thing you know, you're saying, well, what you come in on my property for? And then the person stands there and says, but it's not your property, and all of this. And the person says, well, the law says I could defend my property. So you get off or I'll shoot you, or you might even wait. You know, it's just buying so much trouble. I understand the rationale behind it, but there are other ways to deal with it. And I just want to make this one other point on that, as things that we can do. DNA and ballistic testing. Why are people still on remand? Senior counsel Anthony Vera, he's right. He's a lawyer, so he's going to be dispassionate. If someone is on remand, they have not been convicted. There are people. I did a show once with this lady, I can't remember, but she's an attorney at law, very active in this area. And the number of people who have been sitting on remand, sometimes the time they spend on remand is more than the sentence if they are convicted. Remember the case of Achille Charles? Achille Charles' case, he spent 7 years on remand. Why? Because the magistrate, all that confusion, so his matter had started before her, they had to start it again, de novo. After 7 years, they said there was not enough evidence by the police for him to be convicted. 7 years of his life spent. So you have to understand what Mr. Vera is saying, Senior Counsel Vera is saying. A person on remand is not a person who is convicted. Therefore, you do not treat them the same way. Now, if you do not want that situation to continue with the number of persons that you have on remand, including apparently this gentleman they're speaking about, then you have got to do something about clearing up the remand population. Have special sittings of a court. They may be retired judges. They may be judicial persons. Clear up that remand situation. That's one thing. Another thing, do something about the DNA and ballistics, because the DPP is not going to proceed with a matter when the critical evidence is DNA testing and ballistic testing, and without which he will not go forward because the standard of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. So why don't you deal with the DNA? Why don't you deal with the ballistic testing? Why don't you deal with the clearing up the remand? Why don't you set up like in Jamaica a gun court for those persons who have unlicensed guns? They go and they have to prove that they were in possession of it legally. I don't know how they will, but if they can't, they go to jail. That's what they're doing in Jamaica. So why don't we have a gun court? Why don't we clear the remand? Why don't we deal with the DNA and ballistic testing? Why don't we deal the DPP, give him enough staff? Why don't we have a special fraud office to deal with money laundering and all those suspicious transactions that we have in Trinidad and Tobago? Why don't we do those things? Do those things, and then you could say, we've done all of these things, and now we add in this. But you start in at the back, you deal with all of those things, because that's what Jamaica has been doing, and we have not been doing.
In fact, Karen, I actually suspect just the remand yard alone, obviously, if you deal with all of those things you just listed out, that would improve the situation more than a stand your ground law, right? But just dealing with the long wait times in remand yard alone, I think people might underestimate, oh, what's the big deal, right? Just getting the cases out faster so that we don't have all these people waiting around. Yes, I think that alone would provide more benefit to criminal justice, right? And the levels of crime, to help reduce the levels of crime, than stand your ground. Because the circumstances that remand yard is creating and the complications and the challenges is affecting other parts of the criminal justice system very negatively. And then, of course, it's even more obvious with things like DNA testing, ballistic testing, and the gun court. If they want to have this stand your ground law, things like a gun court and ballistic testing might prove to be not just something that you want to have, but they might be required to a large degree to have large capacity for these things, because, hey, if we saying you can defend yourself, well, we need to have a gun court and ballistic testing to,
and the DNA
ensure
testing,
that these things could properly be tracked. And not just a small gun court and a small ballistic testing facility either. The more FULs you put out there, it's not just the police alone now. Now you need to have enough capacity to ensure that at no point in time you're going to have what you have with the judiciary, where you have a backlog, and you already have a backlog in forensic testing already, from what I understand, where you're going to have a backlog that's going to have all these cases going on for years and years and years and years and years.
Just, you know what
and
it
the
is?
system is going to collapse like how it's already collapsed with the backlog in remand.
Exactly, because here's where it starts. Remember, these people are innocent until proven guilty, They're innocent, as much as you want to condemn them. They are innocent, and that's the law of our country. So if you want to deal with it, deal with the backlog of remand cases. There are so many. Deal with that. And when you deal with that, you can deal with that if you put in a temporary DNA ballistic testing thing while you're building the big facility. Jamaica has one. Why you don't go to Jamaica? They might be able to help their CARICOM country. You don't have to go Australia or Canada. Just go to Jamaica and find out what they're doing right that we're not doing, because something they're doing we're not doing. So have the ballistic testing, the DNA testing, give the DPP his staff, set up a special fraud office, make sure that the police are armed with the body cameras, make certain provisions, tighten the provisions for getting an FUL license, have a committee set up. Those things are not hard to do. Those things are not hard to do. And I would tell you, money spent on keeping people in remand, clothing them, feeding them, you know that is big business in America.
Yeah.
Once they said drugs, crack and cocaine was what it was, 3 strikes and you're out. It is big business in America. You have to feed them, you have to clothe them, you have to hire staff, you have to build the buildings. You know how much money you will save, and the country will be safer. But you're not doing that. And then you had the Prime Minister say, light them up. What kind of thing is that? Oh my God. Listen to me. And let me tell you something. You know, poor, rich, let me tell you something. Sometimes you have to ask yourself, the source of your funds. That is one thing you must find out. If you don't want to have the TTRA, let's find out where you get your money from. Let us know. But then if you cannot account for it, you cannot get a gun.
They already, the promised 10% for public servants as the starting position for wage negotiations, they're already saying that we're trying to find the money. And that's why your point about the money that potentially could be saved on people on remand that are not necessarily going to be around. Now, if they're convicted, then, we're still going to spend money in prison, incarcerating them. But potentially speaking, not all of these remand cases leads to convictions, but the state is paying for them for years, and arguably, you could say some of that money could go to the ballistic testing. Right?
And the
ballistic
DNA
testing
too.
alone
DNA
is probably something that needs heavy investment into.
But DNA too. You have to, by the way, I want to make the point about the remand. People think everybody on remand is there for murder or violent crime. There are people,
exactly.
You know, there are people there, because I had these statistics, of course, I can't remember the lady's name. People there for cursing or littering, but the reason why they're there is they cannot raise the bail, because a lot of the offenses are bailable. But the reason they're still in there is because and those are the ones you can clear up. So if you want to say we'll hold back on the ones that are there for violent murder and so on, and put that in a classification by itself, right? Then focus on the less heinous crimes, set up a special remand court. That's what they do in Jamaica, what they did to clear up their backlog. They appointed lay magistrates, which they do in England, by the way. And those are JPs who are specially trained in the areas of law that they have the authority to adjudicate over. So you can do that, and therefore, in order to clear up that remand, which some people are there for minor crimes. It's not everybody there's a murderer, you know. Right? That's not right what is going on. These people are there because they're poor people and their family has no money, they don't own land, they rent in HCC housing. I mean, this is not right in this country. So my ending point is this, that I think that we need to deal with the low-hanging fruit and deal with those things before we look at something as controversial as stand your ground, when we already have a law called self-defense. And if we want to, we look at what UK has done in amending the self-defense laws that will bring it more in line with what you want to accomplish with stand your ground.
I'll just say this. I don't have a problem with the concept of self-defense. But the implication of these measures is that it's going to be, the scale is going to increase, particularly scale of firearm availability and usage. And I just think that basically it's not just the misuse of the stand your ground laws that we have to worry about, but also people just being stupid and pulling out their gun in very inappropriate ways for a whole host of other scenarios that will get them into trouble and could end up with some people killed, whether it's them or whether it's whoever it is that they have an argument with. And I don't know if as a people we're ready for that, because we don't have a gun culture. We do have a I'm a big man and I will cuss you out culture. Yes. And then when you add guns to that mix of bravado and ego of people who are not necessarily going to be trained well enough on air. You don't just use this to win an argument, right? Bad things can happen. Because we already see on the criminal side, the recklessness. And the criminals come from society. So to some extent, the recklessness is in part from society, and we'll see more of that. So that's my concerns. Arming the population and saying, oh, we have these laws to make it legal. Yeah, that don't mean they're all going to use it legally, right? And as you point out, there's always the risk of people taking advantage of the law in order to commit violent acts, trying to, in the framework and making it appear that it's on the up and up. Now, we do have Mr. San Fernando on the line, so we'll take the call and continue the conversation. I don't know if Karen wants to add anything that what I just said, but we'll take Mr. San Fernando
first. What you said.
Caller, good morning. Are you there?
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Karen.
Morning.
Now, let me say this. Trinidad and Tobago is a small country with 4 prisons. Carrera, Frederick Street, Aruca Prison, the remand yard, and the maximum security prison. One little country with 4 prisons. We have a defense force, or TDF, we have a Coast Guard, we have an Air Guard, we have a police service, and we have a prison service. And we still cannot deal with crime in Trinidad and Tobago. Crime has run away from all the governments since, let's say, since 2000. Let's go back to 2000 and come forward. And they seem not to be able to have the idea of controlling crime. We have had a UNC administration under Basil Pandey that thought they could have used law to deal with the situation. And then another UNC administration that thought they're going to use law. And then we have a third one now that think they're going to use law again to deal with the situation. And none of them have sought to try and look at as Karen said, the structure, the judicial structure to try and deal with the situation first. Too many people in prison, we can't, it's taking too long for a case to come to court. All those men that they're talking about that they moved to Tetron, all of them that they moved to Tetron, all of them on remand.
That's right.
And I say that categorically. All of them are on remand. One of the main ones that they talk about is Mr. Ali, Rajai Ali, who was charged with the murder of Dina Sita Hall 11 years ago.
Yeah.
And they still can't bring that case to court and to finality. And this is the problem. Mr. Alexander said, if you control the streets, you control crime. So the crime plan is national state of emergency, stand your ground legislation. It seems that they have no idea how to control crime. Now let me say this, Karen, about Jamaica. You talk about Jamaica. However, Jamaica has had a reduction of 30. Guy followed the news in Jamaica. 37% reduction in the murder rate from up to the 25th of January this year. However, they have had 152% increase in police shootings and police killings over the same period. And that is exactly, if you look at our situation, we are mirroring that situation. Trying to bring down crime using the police, but using force, and that is not going to fly in the long run. It's not going to fly in the long run. The stand your ground legislation, I have no problem with it. However, people are thinking stand your ground legislation and giving out firearms. The Prime Minister can't dictate to the police commissioner how much firearms to give out. So then what we say the commissioner is a yes man then. And he going to accede to the wishes of the Prime Minister and just give out firearms carte blanche? Because that is what we're saying now, because the stand your ground legislation on its own, without increasing fuels being given out to the population, is a good thing, It is a good thing. So what I am opposing is the police commissioner just handing out firearms over the next year or two. That's my opposition to that. The government have to look at the legislation. I'm not legislation, but look at the judicial system, and as Karen said, put more resources into the hands of the TPP, because he's been complaining about that for too long. Get the court system operating and start to deal with it from that area. You have all them fellows on remand, if all of them guilty, Pat and Morgan go take place. Nobody going and get harmed. Go to the next issue. All of them past the 5 years already.
It's true.
So I think the UNC have to understand they just can't use law to deal with crime.
Yeah.
They have to look at repairing the judicial system in Trinidad and Tobago. Have a good day, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just say this. I think the reason why Mr. Serrano said relying on police using force is not going to work in the long run. At some point, you're going to get bad shootings, and you're going to get too many bad shootings, and then the population is going to start to turn on that. When the crime is bad, you want the police, and you're not necessarily concerned on the consequences. That's what's going on in El Salvador. They don't care if innocent people get locked up, but eventually, once too many people get locked up, and yes, the more you succeed in reducing the crime, the more the consequences against innocent people are going to disproportionately, start to become negative in the eyes of the population. But I will say this, with regards to the firearms, FULs, the commissioner does it based on ultimately legislation, I would imagine, and legislation can be changed, right? He still has his prerogative, but the framework by which he assesses can be changed by changing legislation. So we have to see how far it will go. I don't think he's a yes man. I think he probably will agree to look at FUL applications differently to ERLA. Let's put it that way. We do have a caller from Dabity. I don't know if Karen, if you wanted to just say anything quick before.
No. I think what Mr. San Fernando is always well researched, and so what he said is correct. And there is an outcry of the gangs, and that's why they have this special zone. But we don't have time to deal with Jamaica right now.
Right. Okay, Dabity on the line. Caller, good morning. Caller, good morning.
Yeah, morning.
Morning. Go ahead, Dabity.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sean, and President Morton, Karen.
Yeah.
Sean, Karen did more than sufficient research. I think that this standing ground policy, the legislation, this standing ground policy is all about politics. We need to concentrate much more on reducing our homicide, clearing up some of those court cases. I believe in the gun court, and we need to follow what Jamaica has done, and is receiving so much more benefits from their I think they call it night court. Today you can go to court in the night also.
Yes, that's right.
Being in possession of a firearm. You see, firearms cause over 90%, 95% of the crimes they are used. And if you could curb that, I think that we don't have a problem. Politics should not get in the way of our legislation, and we should, and I think that we have sufficient law to deal with the laws presently, to deal with the home invasion. Because this standing ground policy law will not be a deterrent. So Karen, I wish that you can take your research to the consultation.
I intend to do that.
Send it to them, so therefore they might want to take a second look at it, but they had quite a lot of persons attending and raising pertinent issues. Yeah. So, wonderful program again, Sean. San Fernando, I beg to differ with you today, though you are my brother, but I don't think that we need that legislation right now. And guys, you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, caller. I'm not too sure if Mr. Safran was advocating for legislation, but I won't.
He did say he agreed with the law.
Yeah.
He said he did agree with it. Maybe he'll probably call us back to correct us, huh? But
I don't know, can you, if you want to comment first
No,
before
I just want to say that I assume that he supports the law if certain things are put in place. So, for example, the application procedure, I think that is something, the body cameras by the police and that sort of thing, clearing up the remand because you are innocent. You know, there are a number of things, but I don't think that I myself, I'm not saying I don't support the stand your ground law. I'm saying, given the current state of affairs in Trinidad and the fact that there are so many things that need to be corrected and can be dealt with, you know, I think that it's not so much against the law as much as saying that we have so much other areas that we should focus on and perhaps reconsider that law, because I just see it being a source of controversy in a country that already has enough controversy.
I'll say this. I think my concern is on the FUL side, right? Because like I said, UK has it, but they don't have guns as widespread. In America, the guns were already widespread, and them introducing the law had a whole different meaning. And just giving out guns, so that's basically what I've been saying for the whole segment. Giving out guns more aggressively or making it more freely available, you know, that's what's going to take a self-defense law and then turn it into a potential lethal scenario. And even without the self-defense law, the point of allowing easier access to FULs, scale on a short time frame, you know, regardless of how good the vetting process is. If you just try to get a lot of guns out there very quickly, I just think there's going to be a lot of growing pains with that. And unfortunately, growing pains in this case could end up meaning dead bodies, not just people not knowing what to do and not being good at their job or not being good at whatever it is that they're trying to learn. Talking about dead bodies on our hands. So,
probably the gun court would be a good balance to that. So if you're going to increase the number using vetting processes, then have the gun court which says we're getting all the unlicensed guns off the street, and those who have licensed guns are persons who have complied with the requirements of the law.
Okay, we have Move on the line. Caller, good morning.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Karen.
Morning.
Sean, let me just read part of an article quickly for you. This is from the Express, Thursday, the 9th of November, 2023. All right? You hear that date, right? 2023. Yeah. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
The article starts off. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has recommitted to protecting the public against noise pollution, noting that its officers may immediately on complaints to address an ongoing public nuisance. In a joint statement with the EMA yesterday, right, which would have been the 8th November 2023, both agencies advised of a meeting on November the 3rd to clarify and discuss the way forward given the October 23rd, 2025 judgment of the Court of Appeal in the EMA's appeal against Wild Goose Limited. This meeting was deemed critical, considering that Trinidad and Tobago is approaching periods of heightened event activity, the release said. And let me give you the last part. Coming out of the meeting, the TTPS recommitted, to treating with noise pollution under the Section 70 of the Summary Offences Act, which accords with the specific pronouncements of the Court of Appeal. Now, Sean, when I spoke yesterday, the response from you and Mr. Arul, I felt I was treated as if I was being unreasonable towards the police service. Okay? And I'm saying to you that you told me that how do I know that the hierarchy of the police service hasn't been meeting with the necessary bodies to express it? But Sean, after reading this, don't you think that I, as a citizen, citizens of this country, deserve up to now some explanation from the police service and the EMA joint, telling us what has been done, what could be done, why hasn't it been done? I am not being unreasonable. And I repeat what I said yesterday. This is going to be a long weekend again. And myself and thousands of others are going to be suffering while people who have the authority to deal with it continue to do nothing. And in closing, let me tell you this. Mr. Arun telling me that I have the right to take the necessary government institution or personnel to court for my human rights. It's kind of insulting me because, first of all, he knows, as most people do, I don't have the money to do that. That's one. And two, no citizen in a civilized country should have to go that way or even feel they have to go that way for a simple thing like noise pollution, which most civilized countries, or I don't even want to say developed countries, but any country worth its salt, understand human rights, understand their role, the police that understands their role, has to know that they are supposed to deal with a simple thing like noise pollution. It's simple, but it is very, 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 very destructive, and it's very annoying, and it is a threat to people's health, Sean. Right? I don't think I have to tell you anything more. And Karen, you are there. You, like most lawyers in Trinidad and Tobago, must be able to have read that law that is still there about the Summary Offences Act. And I want somebody to explain to me today, why has that law never been, let me repeat, it has never been enforced. And that is where the problem began. I have never read, I'm 71 years old. I have never read in any newspaper where anyone was charged by that law. And that is the heart of the problem because of lack of law enforcement. And as I always tell you, because of poor governance. I rest my case. Have a good day.
Thank you, Gora.
Okay. Remember, we dealt with it before. I have dealt with it, and I can deal with it again. I think the issue, the answer to your question, is that the Court of Appeal decision, Justice Lucky in particular, I think the news, they did a good report on what is the problem with the EMA taking action against Wild Goose that had this party, and they wanted to shut it down. And the weakness is in the Act, Environmental Management Act itself, which I don't think has a provision for dealing with noise pollution. So I think what they were saying that they needed to amend that law, if I remember. But you can look, as you seem to be looking at your newspapers, look at it. It was in the Newsday, Wild Goose versus the EMA, the Court of Appeal decision, and I think Justice Lucky Gillian Lucky was the one who gave the judgment and explained what needed to be done.
The thing is, I understand the sentiment of what you said. The unfortunate reality is, yes, in civilized nations, people do have to sue the state. Just look at Flint, Michigan. I believe the residents had to sue the Eastern District of, multiple governmental defendants, including the state of Michigan, Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, and as well as individual defendants, including former Governor Rick Snyder. People had to sue the state of Michigan over the water situation in Flint, Michigan. So, and we're talking about access to clean, not even clean water as in it's automatically drinkable. Just access to water that's not going to kill you. Of course, you significant health complications, not just, oh, well, it's a little dirty, right? Like Flint, Michigan's water, I believe, I have the impression, it's way worse than the average quality of water we get in our pipes here.
Yes.
So they had to essentially sue their state, right? It happens. I get it that you yourself do not have the financial resources to do so. To some extent, it's a rhetorical statement in the sense that for the action groups or concerned citizens groups or whatever collective of individuals that want to speak to this issue, this is a potential way to try to address it that has not been addressed before. That's all it is. You have your right to do it, and sometimes citizens are forced into this situation, right? If you cannot get a solution politically by making it an issue that will then help determine an election, so that whoever's voted in at the time will take the issue more seriously because it was such a topic on the election. But unfortunately, we have things that are, I would say, and please don't get insulted by this, but this is reality. People will be more concerned about the economy and crime because culturally we tolerate and or accept noise pollution too much. And I'm not saying it's right to do so. I'm just saying it is what it is, right? And if we want to change things, we can't just say, well, it's not right to do so and hope that it changes. No. So this is not an easy situation. Karen just pointed out that one deficiency in the legislature. Yes, you are deserving of an explanation by the police and the EMA.
Yeah, and he mentioned the Summary Courts Act. What happened in the Summary Courts Act? I think if you're dealing with noise pollution, you can go to court, the magistrate's court, and you can sue for damages, but that's not going to help you. The party's still going on, and they didn't shut down music.
Yeah, the party's already happened.
And it's still going, and that is the problem. So I think
the next party will come again.
Right.
But
so
the law only allows for that to happen.
Right.
You know, if it's a bar,
and they got permission,
there was a case in Tobago where they sued the bar, and eventually the bar lost its liquor license, and it was, you know, because that's an ongoing thing. So the court could treat it as an ongoing thing. Now, we do know that there are other deficiencies, complications, and disingenuous actions over things like that, right? Of course, a lot of the complaints are with regards to bars and other places, not bars, that are essentially committing noise pollution and facing no consequence. You deserve an explanation. I am not saying that you don't. You very much do. That still doesn't mean that the authorities have everything they need to treat with every different circumstances. The wild goose situation, I think, also kind of was in an area where they could have maybe done something, but that's a complicated case where, as Karen said, the law, there was a deficiency.
Something to do with the decibels. They had gotten a license to have this party, right? But they had given them a decibel level at which they had to think, and after that they had to shut it down. And one of the problems too is they didn't have the instrument to measure it. Another thing, they didn't have specific things. But you know what you can do, sir? What you can do is go to the judiciary. Just go. I'm looking at it right now, and you can read the judgment yourself, and you'll see what they said. It's just go to the judiciary, Environmental Management Authority of Trinidad and Tobago versus Wild Goose Limited, and you have the judgment delivered by Prakash Musai, Justice Gillian Lucky, and then comments that she made. Gillian Lucky made those comments. So it's there, 2023. And look at it, and it might explain it, and we could look at it another time again. But that's where you can start to understand the problem.
You deserve an explanation from the police and the EMA.
Right.
But that's not where the solution is going to come from.
Yeah.
So trying to fight with the police and EMA and blaming them outright for everything that's wrong is not going to get you anywhere. Legislation has to be updated, modified, fixed, changed, what have you. And as long as too many members of the population are willing to tolerate loud music and noise pollution and the like, and not just tolerate, there will be a not too small subsection of the population that is happy for it, wants it, and enjoys it. As long as that is there, the politicians have absolutely near zero of an incentive to do anything about it based on all the other things they have to do. They're not going to prioritize it. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying that's the way it is.
Can I just say this?
In order to solve the problem, you have to deal with those circumstances. You can't just say, well, it's not right for it to be this way. No civilized country allows for something like this. Hey, and there's a lot of things like this. It might not be noise pollution. It could be water quality. It could be air quality. It could be whatever the equivalent is to town and country planning, building on flood zones, building codes, building inspectors not being out to scruff, food health inspectors not being out to scratch. There's corruption exists everywhere, deficiency in law exists everywhere, and controversial governance practices exist everywhere.
Yeah, but you know what is the point, though? This case was heard since 2023, and Justice Gillian Lucky said what the problem was. And up to now it hasn't been fixed. And I just want to read what's the part that he will, just to be clear. When at the end of the judgment, it said, nonetheless, the officers of the Environmental Police Unit, in keeping with their duties under Section 45 of the Police Service Act, the reasonable exercise of their discretion and all the circumstances of the case could have turned off the music at the event to abate the crime of public nuisance created by wild goose. But the damages didn't come up. So what I think is you're probably saying is it was already identified what the problem was and what had to be done in order to deal with the problem that you were speaking of, which is an amendment to the EMA legislation and probably the Police Service Act, and that would solve the issue, I believe. I believe that.
Right. But there's the thing with wild goose is not like some of the other noise pollution situations which might need their own fixes as well.
Yeah.
So noise pollution is an overall problem, but it's really made up of a collection of various sub-issues or different scenarios which will be touched on with different laws. The one thing that's very, very bad and unfortunate situation is it seems like across the board there are deficiencies in law, but it's not all the same deficiencies in law. And to some extent, you know, I'm not going to try to claim that I fully understand it, but we end up with a lot of gray areas and loopholes that at this point in 2025, the perpetrators know how to exploit them. And we need legislature willing to close those loopholes. Otherwise, there's only so much the police can do, right? So we have a couple comments to get through before we close the show at our time. So we'll take the first comment first. This speaks to the topic at hand. Good day. When a government promotes violence by citizens to protect themselves, to me, that is an admission of the government that it has relinquished its responsibility to protect its citizens. To some extent, I can't disagree with that sentiment. Just note they were voted in campaigning on this. So it's not quite
one of the
same thing as saying a government is now going to rely on this because they failed to do it themselves. They got voted in on this. So it kind of makes it a little bit
TTRA? You don't think they got
different.
voted in on the TTRA too?
So
all right,
then now we have another comment. Karen, this one is to you, and I hate to say this, but I did forget about this request myself, I believe.
Yeah.
I previously requested Karen research cases with incidents with open gates, padlock gates, etc. And I'm going to paraphrase. If someone is inside your property, your gate is closed and padlocked, do you invite them for coffee? I'm wondering if this has to do with duty of care when you know someone is potentially trespassing on your property. That is the extent of my legal knowledge on this issue.
In real terms, though, I mean, people do that now because the crime rate is so high. So you could really be going by a friend or thinking by a friend again, oh God, boy, they really taking this thing seriously. Now, you know, need to open it up, no man, I come open up because they don't think it's, if you were probably in Barbados and saw that, you might be concerned.
The comment is speaking about if your property is locked up, but there's an intruder within your property.
Oh, well,
right?
yes. Well,
and he's asking, do you invite them for coffee?
But he's being sarcastic, obviously.
I'm not entirely sure what is the full context of why he's asking that.
What he's saying is this. What I think he's trying to be, he's being sarcastic by saying, please, you're an intruder. It's clearly, you see my place is padlocked. You jump over the fence. You're standing up in my yard. You can't be coming there to tell me I've come to have coffee with you. So is that a situation where there's a reasonable sense of danger, but is the danger immediate? Could you pick up the telephone and call the police? Could you call a neighbor? Could you start screaming and shouting, get out? Do you have guard dogs? So they're saying, what are your options? And that's why the court will look at the circumstances in any event to see whether your response by shooting is the correct response. But with this proposed law, it may embolden people to feel that they don't have to go through all those steps. They have the right to stand their ground. You're on my property, shoot first, ask questions after, and that's the concern.
I think it doesn't necessarily matter whether your property was unsecured or locked with regards to if you could use lethal force. As Karen said, that's a whole other set of requirements of what is the immediate danger to you. Just because someone trespassed on your property doesn't mean that there's an immediate danger to you. Not all burglars are violent. Some burglars are very violent. Let's just say that off the jump. Not all burglars are violent. Some of them, if you confront them, they want no conflict, they'll run away right away. Others won't. And then now, the longer that they persist trespassing and looking to confront you while you're while you have acknowledged, hey, I see you there, I am here, you're not just gonna freely walk into my house with me unaware, right? Then it starts the question of, is my safety at risk?
And is
yes,
my response proportionate?
Yes either.
Yeah, but
right?
the other part is my response proportionate to the threat that is perceived?
Yes.
That's the other part.
Right? Because, listen, there might be these weird cases where criminals try to, like, ignore you. I mean, if they touch you, then to some extent, you know, that starts the conversation on a physical conflict. But if they try to, like, ignore you, maybe grab and dash, can you shoot them? Probably not. Say if you have something in your yard and they jump the wall and they grab it and they try to jump back. There's no threat to you. You can't just shoot them. If they try to shove you out of the way and go into your house and maybe your kids are in the house, then that's a whole different question where reasonably one could argue, hey, I have to protect my kids. I can't just let this guy go in my house and do who knows what. He already tried to push past me in an aggressive manner, put his hands on me. My kids are inside. So the problem with things like this is to try to define it with a generalized statement is impossible. It is very much a case-by-case basis.
But they do
where at some point you're going to be dependent on case law and trying to case law for each individual circumstance, right? Because each individual circumstance is going to be unique, and you're going to have to address it as such. And then you update case law with each precedent set, and you're always going to get into something that you haven't anticipated before. Some wacky circumstances, chain of events that led you to a situation. Was this justifiable or not? And you'll have to assess it on its own merits.
One thing I would just say, add to that, in terms of what you're saying about circumstances, both the stand your ground legislation does outline the circumstances, because it's not exhaustive, but circumstances which would lead one to believe that there's a threat to themselves. And under the English version, they also have, under Section 76, they also set out a number of circumstances under which one can consider that there is a threat, that you can justify your conduct. So they do give you guidelines.
So we have a follow-up comment, I believe. We'll take the comment. Okay. As far as I know, closed gates is a denial. Yeah, yes, it is. But, like, it's still subjective. If the gate is closed but not locked and they open it, I don't think you could have any argument to use lethal force yet. If your gate is locked and they're trying to physically break in by bashing your gate or drilling your gate, and you basically shout out to say, hey, you there, stop, and they keep going, bashing your gate in, well, now you're starting the consideration of, is this threatening behavior?
To your life? Is it threatening your life or your car?
Personal safety.
Anyway.
Huh?
Oh, they might come in there to steal something, but does that give you right to kill them?
Right, yeah, that's why I say you're starting the conversation, but it's not necessarily, you know, proven 100% that, hey, you're in a fight for your life, right? If they are physically using violence to break into your house while you are there and you acknowledge their presence, you're starting the conversation, right? But probably this is the point where you definitely call the police, right? You don't shoot first still.
You sure you want to call the police and wait on them to come?
Well, listen, the system depends on the other parts to work, right? And this is why what you said earlier, this is within that framework. When you have deficiencies like remand yard, it affects other parts of the system. The unfortunate thing is police response now is going to affect this stand your ground thing.
I have the police, so don't go ahead. If I have a problem,
but
I want you to come.
I'm just pointing it out. This is very right. The police response times, if they are too long, are going to negatively impact stand your ground cases, because then people are going to try to say, well, the police aren't going to reach in time. What was I supposed to do?
Guess what? The judge will believe them, and so will the jury.
Exactly. That's what I say. It's gonna have an impact, and it's potentially going to be a negative impact, because we could get a Trayvon Martin situation because of that, right? It might not be the same exact circumstances, but we can get it because I feared for my life. The police are taking too long. So it's just that's why these things are very complicated. Very complicated, and that's why it's so controversial, and that's why it seems no one has really solved the Rubik's Cube of how to get it right, you know, 100% of the time. That's what happens when you introduce guns into the equation or violence into the equation. All right, so we should close there, Karen. I don't know if you have any last words.
No, I'm fine.
Give to the people?
No, I think we've exhausted the topic enough, and so I would say
all right, well,
goodbye.
I'll close with this. I still think if resources are an issue, CARICOM or the regional partners are an opportunity for certain things to try to pool resources together in order to get certain capabilities. One of those things could be certain types of forensic testings or technological advancements, right? It all depends on how practical it is, right? Because sometimes, look, we just need to have it in every island, so there's no pooling of resources there. We can't outsource our police to regional partners, for instance, right? We all have to have our own police. But potentially, if resources and financial considerations are the bottleneck, then regional partnerships might help in this situation. Regional services might help in this situation. And there's a bit more controversial directions that could go, like potentially regional prisons. But that has a whole host of potential controversies attached to that concept. So, and we don't have time to get into it. I'm just going to mention it as something that you could maybe consider, but I'm not advocating for, right? Because resources is one of the things that is limiting our immediate response, and it's limiting the responses of our regional partners. So to what extent is it practical to band together for certain things? Maybe more effort should be put into looking into that. But at the end of the day, certain things we still have to do for ourselves, like the DPP's understaffing, like the remand yard, like gun court, like certain aspects of DNA and firearm testings we have to have the capacity to do for ourselves, and we might just have to bite that bullet. So with that said, thanks to the comments. With the last commenter, if we didn't answer you, you could have follow-up questions, but on a later show. Thanks to all the callers, of course, for the discussions. I know the noise pollution answer is not what you want to hear. I can't change it myself. It is what it is. It has to change to some extent from political and societal levels. With that said, have a good day. Stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. And never forget, it's nice to be nice. Even if people that you meet along the way are being rude, don't be rude back. Be nice back. Kill them with kindness. And then no one could say that it was your fault. And we could see each other. We could see each other. Yes, especially you politicians in Parliament. Jesus.
Gosh.
So we could see each other tomorrow. Be nice today. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.